Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. One of the great mysteries of reality is time. Nobody can really say what exactly time is. We all have an intuitive feeling that we know what it is, but if ever asked to actually explain it, we invariably find that we are unable to do so. We always have to resort to using the word time to define time, as if there are no other words to adequately clarify it. This is a bit odd, since time is one of the most basic things in our lives. We possess some sense of time from our first moments alive. Perhaps we even have it in the womb. Its reality accompanies us throughout our lives, never really leaving us unaware of it in some way or another, even for an instant. We may think that we escape its clutches when under the blissful, unconscious state of sleep. But then we find that even in dreams, time reaches out to us in some unexpected manner, showing us that it can find us wherever we go. Time is the endlessness of a boring day. It is the breathlessness of an exciting event. It is the pace of history as it winds its way through lives and generations and centuries and millennia. It finds a place in the flash of the decay of a subatomic particle and in the infinite eternity of the universe. It ticks away continuously on our watches, our computers, our hearts, and in the lives of our cells. It never rests and never reveals the secrets of its existence. It simply is. Perhaps it is the closest thing in our experience to understanding the most fundamental question of all, the nature of existence. What does it mean to exist if not to be somehow moving along in time? To be carried by that ubiquitous and relentless force that always propels forward is to be real. Anything that isn't subject to it is by definition not quite existent. This perhaps is why we sometimes wonder about the reality of intangibles like numbers or God or the sense of beauty. These things don't seem to be under the sway of time. They are timeless and thus not quite real in the sense that we are familiar with. This week has a double Parsha. They are called Vayakhel and Pekudei. It frequently works out this way for these Parshas since they cover much of the same subject matter. They both deal with the actual construction of the tabernacle and the priestly garments. They always seem very detailed and a bit tedious to one who just wants to read them through. But they tell of the completion of this amazing structure in the distant and almost mythical time when the Israelites were wandering through the wilderness accompanied by the supernatural presence of God. It was the tabernacle that encompassed this presence in some way. The best description the Torah gives of this presence was of that of a cloud that hovered around the tabernacle, impenetrable but as real as a rainbow. It happens that this week there is another Parsha, shorter than the others, but still reckoned as a Parsha. It is called HaChodesh, the first word in a phrase which means this month. This Parsha is always read this time of year, immediately before the onset of the first month of spring. This month is called Nisan according to the Jewish calendar. That word is not actually Hebrew. It came from ancient Babylon, the place the Israelites were exiled to about 2,500 years ago. It was during this period of exile that many things entered Judaism, including the names of the months and perhaps the self-identification of Jews believing in a religion called Judaism. Prior to this period, the months had other names, though we are only aware of a few of them. This particular month was called Aviv, meaning spring. But in the Torah itself, there are no names for the months. They are simply the first month, the second month, and so on. This may seem strange to us, being as we take the names of the months as facts of life, as permanent as the earth or the stars. But this was not always the way things were, for the months at one time were a unique way of keeping track of the passing of time. Awareness of the months in the year was as essential to ancient peoples as the ticking of the clock is for us. Each month represented a different phase of the annual cycle of life. The seasons were the big picture, as they are today, but it was the waning and waxing of the moon that reminded people that time was ever on the move. This Parsha opens with a verse that puts this perspective front and center. Quote, "This month will be for you the first of the months. It shall be for you the first month of the year. While that verse may seem a little repetitive, every word was finally interpreted by ancient rabbinic authorities to be something of great significance for Judaism. This is the verse in determining the intricacies of the Jewish calendar, a dauntingly complex system that manages to synchronize the count of the months with the count of the year. Although this may seem like a simple matter, it is anything but. The solar year is a little over 365 days, while the 12 lunar months add up to about 354 days. Getting these two counts to match was one of the great challenges of ancient life, and it was seen as a source of great mystery. Right after this, the Parsha goes into the real purpose of why we read it this time of year. The rest deals with the subject of the upcoming holiday of Passover. The Torah records this not as a celebration of the past, but as anticipation of the future. This was to be the first Passover, the one which would dictate the story for all future celebrations. The main events are all described in this short Parsha. The lamb or goat for the meal, the blood on the doorpost for divine protection from the final plague, the preparing and eating of matzah to represent the suddenness of the Exodus, and the bitter herbs to recall what life was like in servitude. With all that drama and ritual significance contained in this Parsha, this little verse at the beginning about the months seems somewhat out of place. It seems to have nothing whatsoever to do with Passover and the Exodus and the hand of God. What is it doing there right at the beginning? And why is this Parsha dealing with Passover called by the title, This Month? The real answer to that last question is that this is the first defining word of the Parsha. But beyond that, there is a much more complex answer that gets into Jewish history and the way that Judaism views the nature of time. This is the first month of the biblical year. That much is crystal clear. Although it is well known that the Jewish year begins on Rosh Hashanah, which always comes at the beginning of autumn, Nisan is still considered the first of the months. This little nuance of the Jewish calendar is largely the product of historical circumstances that occurred during the long history of the Jews in various parts of the ancient world. At some point in the distant past, the first day of the seventh month became the first day of the year, even though that month was still the seventh month of the year. In a sense, there are two beginnings of the Jewish year: the biblical reckoning according to months and the later reckoning according to days. Rosh Hashanah is the first day of the Jewish year, but Nisan, a half year earlier or later, is still the first month. Now that we've cleared up that matter, we can get to the more important matter of the Jewish understanding of time. Anybody who spends any amount of time around observant Jews recognizes that there is always a background awareness of something special coming up in the sequence of time. It may be remembering how long until Shabbat comes up in the week, or knowing what time of day to pray, or how many minutes until something has to happen. It may be longer spans like the 7-year agricultural cycle or the longer 50-year Jubilee cycle. It may be something as constant as the annual cycle of the Parshas of the week. But the granddaddy of them all is the counting of the months. The moon is remarkable in its consistency. The week is really a mental construct that has no basis in physical reality. The year is too gradual to notice, and the hours of the day are too fast to dwell upon. But the month is as noticeable and as cyclical as the ticking of the clock or the rising or setting of the sun. We may not pay all that much attention to it any longer, being as it holds no great significance in our lives, but it is still there doing its thing whether we notice it or not. Judaism makes a surprisingly big deal about the new month, heralding it as the renewal of life in some way. The monthly recognition of the new moon and the new month is called Parashat HaChodesh in Hebrew. This means the sanctification of the new moon, an event worth celebrating, even if it is as predictable as the schedule of a show on television. The constant changing of the moon is seen in Judaism as a source of holiness, for it is one of the great reminders of the holiness of time. Time is indeed a mystery, but mystery is one of the key ingredients of holiness, something that is as easy to grasp as munching on potato chips or scrolling through posts on Facebook hardly ranks up there on the holiness scale. But something as mysterious as time cannot be anywhere but near the top. The passing of time is the way that God lets us know that we are real and that there is something greater and more sublime than rocks and frustration and candy. It is right with us always, but somehow simultaneously more remote than the most distant star and deeper than the most profound thought. Time is God's clock, the dimension that we cannot ever fully grasp. It is in concrete things like the moon that we are able to gain some sense of the reality of time. By noticing its waning and waxing, we become aware of our place in this great epic that we call existence. We witness this miracle when we take the time to recognize that it is indeed a miracle. The moon may be nothing more than a large rock in space, reflecting varying amounts of sunlight back to us. But that itself is a miracle. That we have the intelligence and the desire to recognize such wonders, and that we can use its patterns to regulate the times of our lives and attach profound significance to that which is, in a sense, nothing more than the blind workings of nature, is miracle in and of itself. Time is holy. Every second, minute, hour, day, week, month, and year is a sacred interval in the mysterious dimension of existence. We can use that time to find holiness in our lives, or we could do something else with it. The choice is ours. But the consequences are something that we shouldn't take lightly. To see time as a gift is to celebrate existence. Shabbat Shalom.